So often, particularly in endurance performance, we're concerned about what is our speed or how fast are we traveling. So today, I want to break down the components to speed. What are the different variables that influence how fast we can go, whether you're a swimmer, cyclist, or runner? I'm going to mainly focus on cycling as a bit of a case study, but I will take you through very quickly some of the different components that might also impact you from a running and a swimming perspective as well. So without any further ado, let's talk about speed. Hey YouTube, welcome back to the channel. Nick here, talking science of endurance and everything sports science in general. Thanks to all the subscribers who have joined up and subscribed already, but if you haven't, please consider hitting that big red button down below if you are wanting to follow along any new content, but also if you've been enjoying the content up on the channel so far. Very, very close to 3,000 subscribers and absolutely appreciate all the support for the channel. And head over to Instagram as well, at NJ_sportscience. Check out all the great different content that is coming up on the Instagram page. Different things around training, what I'm doing in my own training, day-to-day work as a sports scientist, all of that you can go check out on the Instagram page. As for today's video, we're talking about speed and the components that make up speed in a number of different circumstances. So I'm going to rapid fire through swim and run because those ones are relatively straightforward, but then I want to talk mainly about cycling and the interaction between a number of variables that inevitably give us our speed, to give you an understanding of it's not just always about the output or how hard we might be trying to work. It's actually got to do with a number of different factors that contribute also. So fundamentally, when we're looking at speed as a whole, it really results from three key areas. The physiological output, so what are we actually creating or producing internally? What are the resistances, or what are our abilities to overcome those resistances external that are I guess, counterbalancing what we're physiologically outputting? So these two here, physiological output and resistance, kind of work against each other. We want to tip that more in our favor so that our output is actually meaningful and giving us an advantage rather than being limited. And the third area is how effective or sustainable is our movement? Can we produce this again and again and again for a long period of time? Particularly for endurance, this is obviously critical. So if I remove a couple of these from the screen, let's talk about swimming as a starting point. Speed results from physiological output. Why? Well, if I turn my arms over with more force through the water, if I catch really well, assuming my technique's quite good, the harder and faster I move my body, theoretically, I should have more speed. Limiting factor being ability to overcome the resistance. Is there a lot of frontal resistance? Based on my technique, am I sitting quite low in the water? Are my hips sinking? That's a common thing a lot of athletes talk about is I can't get my hips or I can't get my feet up to the surface. Feet dragging through the water, what does that cause? More frontal resistance. Becomes harder to overcome. So you might be working really, really hard, smashing the arms around in the pool, and you're going nowhere. So that physiological output is actually being inhibited. So we need to work out, all right, is it a technical thing? Is it maybe wearing a wetsuit versus non-wetsuit? A lot of triathletes, long course triathletes who race in cool conditions and then they go to warm climates might have great swims when they got a wetsuit, slippery material, really buoyant in the water, reduces much resistance, helps them along a bit. Take the wetsuit off, their open water swim times might actually start to slow down because now they're sitting a little bit lower in the water, not as much of that slippery material. If they're just wearing like a sleeveless outfit, for example, all of these things can start to play into that resistance category. And then how effective and sustainable the movement is just how good is that technique? Is it putting unnecessary strain or pressure on your shoulders? Is it a technique that is actually, maybe we're not getting a full catch in the water, we're slipping the water and it's causing us to actually exert a lot of physiological output and we're not going anywhere. Not necessarily from a resistance thing, we might be slipping the water, we might be coming through the water really quickly and overcoming, say our hand coming through the water, overcoming any resistance there, but it's not actually propelling us forward, and that's then kind of a negative. So that's from a swimming perspective. If we then go back and we have a look from a running perspective now, physiological output, again, how hard and fast can I move my body, or how much force can I produce? How quickly can I turn the legs over? Pretty straightforward from a running perspective. Our ability to overcome resistance comes down to things like body weight. Comes down to if you're a trail runner, are you carrying a pack with water and supplies in the back? That's added resistance. Obviously, we have gravity now that we need to talk about. Not in the pool. When you're in the pool, you're buoyant in the water, so we don't really have to worry about gravity too much because we're in a fluid. When we're standing up, we're running, we now have to overcome gravity to be able to produce our movement. I have to get vertical off the ground to be able to step over and move forward. I can't just move forward, otherwise my feet would be shuffling and sliding on the ground, which isn't a really effective movement, is it? So we now need to overcome that resistance. Body weight's also a factor. The lighter you are, typically the more effective you are. It is easier to continue to move that system or move your body around, and it's less difficult, I guess, to overcome that body weight resistance. Running up a hill or versus downhill on the flat, all of these contribute. How effective and sustainable our movement is. Are our arms and legs going everywhere? Or have we got a nice rhythmical, compact technique that can be repeated at a number of different speeds or a number of different physiological outputs to give us that sustainability to our speed as well? Again, all of these are factors in the equation. So if we move on to cycling now, I want to use this as a bit of a prime example. If we now talk about cycling speed, this is where things start to shift a little bit. It's not as simple. We can kind of break it down a little bit more. And I want to use this as a bit of a case study of how you take those major three categories and refine them down into some really key, more specific components for that sport. So if we're looking specifically at cycling speed, our physiological output largely comes down to our power output. How many watts are we putting through the pedals, through the cranks, through the drivetrain to get us moving? If everything stays equal, higher wattage is going to equal higher speed. If you've got the same tailwind the entire way across your time trial, exactly 0% gradient, so you're exactly flat, nothing else changes. If you hold a higher wattage than someone else, you're going to have a faster speed. That's kind of as simple as it is. Where it starts to get complex is that overcoming resistance. What are our resistances got to do with? Well, it's largely down to our aerodynamics. Are we producing a lot of drag? Is our clothing slowing us down? Quite often we see poorly fitting clothing, big baggy pockets. If you've got an open jersey, all this might be capturing air and actually creating more drag or more resistance. Is it to do with your position? Is it to do with the interaction between your helmet and the back of your shoulder blades? Is there a big gap there? Are you constantly, a classic one I see all the time, is athletes with big, long aero helmets thinking they're going to be great, really fast, it's going to help me. As soon as they look down to look at their cycling computer in front of them, the big cone part of the helmet sticks up, creates more drag than actually what they were looking for. So it's actually slowing them down, acting like a bit of a sail. So aerodynamics plays into it, bike componentry a whole lot. Body weight obviously comes into it a bit when we start to talk about uphill cycling in particular and your power to weight ratio, but then also just overcoming that initial resistance to get yourself moving. If you're a lighter rider, you can accelerate faster. It's a simple law of physics, is force is equal to mass times acceleration. So it's the type of thing that if we rearrange that and try and look for the highest acceleration of an object, if you apply the same amount of force and you're lighter, you're going to go faster. That's the nature of things. It's the same as if I hit a golf ball with the same amount of force as I hit a bowling ball, well, the golf ball's going to fly off, the bowling ball's not going to move anywhere. So it's the type of thing, body weight does play a bit of a role, particularly when we are going uphill. Tend to see the lighter guys go really fast, bigger guys tend to do well on the flats because we're now adding in a bit of a gravity component, but largely it's dictated by how much weight we're carrying as a person as well. This might also, if we're thinking weight in general, might be factors like the weight of your bike, how many bottles you're carrying, how much nutrition you've got as well. All of that, particularly for uphill cycling, can have a bit of an influence. And the last thing here, when we talk about how sustainable something is on the bike, it's largely due to comfort. What is our bike position like? Can we sit in that position for hours on end? If you're an Ironman triathlete, you might be on the bike for 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6.5 hours, however long you're riding for. You want to be comfortable in that position so you can reproduce that physiological output, that power. You can remain as aero as possible. You can't really change your body weight, obviously, but those two factors there in the green and the red is going to then give to the highest speed that we can sustain. And if we can sustain it for a long period of time because we're comfortable, that's going to lead to, ideally, an optimal performance. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into what are the different components of speed when it comes to swimming, cycling, and running. Do you have any questions down below, or what are some of the factors that you've tried to manipulate before? Leave them in the comments down below. Always interested to hear how you guys are interacting with these different physiological or scientific principles or these different components to performance. Let me know how you've been going. As always, continue to please subscribe to the channel, share these videos, pass on what we're doing here on the channel. Really do appreciate the support. I want to keep growing this great community we've got, trying to learn the science of endurance. And head over to Instagram as well. Check out all the great content still to come and already up there on the Instagram page at NJ_sportscience. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there for today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.